Alright, thank you everybody for subscribing to my videos. I want to thank you immensely. I'm now over 400, which for me is a big deal. I know for some people who have like a gazillion subscribers it may not be a big deal, but for me it's a big deal. Thank you for that. And my goal is to try to do one of these videos a week, one of these short clips. It's really difficult. I got a lot going on with illustration, teaching, and then making the actual DVD. So to do the clips is last in that hierarchy. So today's clip is going to be all about fabric, okay? Because 2 or 3 people actually requested a clip on drawing fabric, and I eventually one day will put out a whole DVD on it, but let me just give you some basics. So let's have the camera lady zoom on over to this little drawing and get all 3 of these in at the same time. So the first thing that you've got to think about when you're drawing fabric is the planes, alright? So you got to think about back plane, kind of under plane, and side plane. And let's go over now to the skirt. Let's zoom in a little bit here. So if I look at the skirt from here down to this to up, that's the side of her hip. And then from here across, that's the back plane of her hip, okay, or the back plane of her butt, let's just say that. And then we start to turn under. Okay, so let's go back to this little photo now. Sorry, this little drawing. Think of the planes, okay? That's number one, the overall big structure of what you're drawing when you're drawing fabric. Now I know this planes drawing is not going to help you draw the fabric, but trust me, I'll talk about that in a second. But you got to think about the planes. And then the next thing you got to think about is not keeping your line on the edge and just focusing in on the contour, because if you do, you've got nothing that rolls in. So you need to roll some line into the fabric, vertical and horizontal, not too many, just a few, to describe the form. Okay, so let me show you where I did that on a couple of them. So let's zoom over to the skirt now, and right over here is one where I zoom in, where I roll into the form, and then I have another one where I roll in, and here's one rolling into the form and describing the form. It's really helpful. This is what I meant about a vertical one that comes in, and we've got like another vertical one over here that comes in. Now when they come in, you just want to bring them into your drawing. Don't leave them on the edge, don't leave them on the contour, bring them in and then just make them disappear. Okay, so that is immediately going to give your drawing a little bit more character. Now again, pick and choose your battles with that, because on this top plane, the hem of the Micro Mini over here, there's none of that. Okay, maybe I could do like a little bit on that belt hoop, but just pick and choose your battles. And then if we go over to her top, which I really barely finished, I've got one convex that comes into the form and then it disappears, and then I've got a couple others. I've got one over here that comes in and disappears, and as I do it I roll around the form, and that describes it. You don't want to do what I did. Let's go back to this little example drawing. You don't want to do what I did over here, bring it in and then stop, and then you've got all these things and it looks weird. So you got to bring it in and then just have it disappear, and I talk about that on every drawing. Okay, so now the third thing that you've got to think about when we do fabric is, we talked about the planes, we've talked about the convex line, and now there's cylinders on top of that stuff. So each fold in the fabric, you got to think of it either as planes or as these little mini cylinders that wrap around the form. Okay, so there's a little cylinder over here, and the overall thing of her butt, the overall form of her butt is a big kind of sphere. Now, let's go over to this fabric now, and this is my first cylinder, so I'm actually using the hem to wrap around that cylinder, and then I'm just going to shade the underplane of that cylinder. And then if we come over here, we've got another skinny little cylinder. This thing is a cylinder too, and you've got to think of each of these like light and shadow, top plane light, underplane shadow, top plane light, underplane shadow, and then cast shadow. But these little cylinders are subservient to the overall picture of this. If the camera lady wants to come on over here, the surface planes. Okay, so now you just got to think that the side of her hip is in shadow and the back of her butt is catching light. So if I wanted to promote this a little bit more, I could just shade the whole side plane just a little bit more, because this is the most important thing that you've got to think about, that the side of her hip, this is the big macro, and the cylinders are the small micro. Okay, so now when we get down here, even this little thing over here is a little cylinder. And then this shadow shape, this abstract shadow shape over here, it's light because it's in the light, is a plane. So this does get a little complicated, no doubt about it, but you're thinking about each like a little individual fold. This fold over here, now what is the value? I'm not going to make it black like that because that's in the shadow and that's in the shadow and that's in the shadow. This is primarily in the light, so I'm not going to make that shadow shape my darkest dark. So now that's a top plane, okay, and that's catching light. That's a semi underplane, that's catching shadow, and then we go to like another kind of plane right over here. So just think about that, and sometimes it's also helpful when you're drawing fabric to draw the little hem, or where they stitch the fabric together, let's just call it that. And where they're stitching the fabric together right over here, I'm drawing those things, and as I draw them, I have no straight lines, like it's wrapping around, and it's going with the lay of the land. In this particular case, it's going with the lay of the way that her butt is wrapping around. Okay, so just if you can follow this like little shadow thing over here now. So now I'm going with this shadow, and it's going right into the side plane of the cylinder of her leg. So I know some of this stuff is very repetitious, and I've talked about planes and I've talked about cylinders and all that on just about every single one of my DVDs, and I also talk about the convex line is one of the biggest things, like what I'm doing right now. I talk about that a lot, but in drawing there's only like maybe 10 things that you need to master. You do not need to master 1,000 things. You need to master about 10 to 12, and they recur in every single thing that you draw. So yes, this is a little repetitious, and some of you guys might be looking for the next best thing, but it's not the next best thing. It's all taking what you already know and just mastering it and applying it to everything that you do.